Hello, everyone. I've been a long-time reader of stories like these, always thinking I would never have one of my own to tell. My life, while not without its challenges, had always felt stable, predictable in the best possible way. Life, however, has a way of blindsiding you, shattering the comfortable reality you built brick by painstaking brick, leaving you standing amidst the rubble wondering how you missed the earthquake coming. I've been carrying this burden, this heavy weight of betrayal and a grim sort of victory for months now. It is time to finally let it out. Let me be clear from the outset. I am not the type to jump to conclusions, to see conspiracy in every whispered word, or assume the worst intentions in the people I love. I'm a pragmatic man. I work hard. I believe in building things that last, whether it is my career, my relationships, or our shared life. My wife, Sophia, and I had been together for 7 years, married for 5. We were in our early 30s, at that stage where you start seriously planning the next few decades. We talked about buying a bigger house, starting a family, traveling more. Things felt solid. We had the usual ups and downs, sure, minor disagreements about finances or in-laws or vacation destinations, but nothing that ever made me think this could break us. In fact, for most of our relationship, we were that couple. The one with the easy laughter, the shared glances, the comfortable silence. We had our stupid inside jokes that nobody else understood. We could debate for hours about the most trivial things, and we had developed a rhythm, a shared language that just worked. She planned elaborate date nights that always surprised me, and I would surprise her with her favorite takeout after a long day she had spent working late. It felt easy, natural, like we had somehow, against all odds, figured out the complex equation of love and partnership. We were building a future together brick by brick, just like I believed you were supposed to do. That is why what happened next, the slow, insidious shift that began about 8 months ago, hit me with the force of a physical blow. It started subtly, so subtly that at first I dismissed it. Minor details that were easy to overlook if you were not paying close attention, but which, viewed in hindsight, were cracks spiderwebbing across the foundation of our marriage. The first thing I noticed was her phone. Before, her phone was just a device, often left charging on the kitchen counter or forgotten on a coffee table for hours. It was unlocked, and she did not care who picked it up if it rang. Suddenly, it became an extension of her hand, glued to her palm. It went everywhere with her, to the kitchen for a glass of water, to the bathroom, even when she was just moving laundry from the washer to the dryer. One evening, while we were watching TV, I reached out to hand her the remote, and as my hand came near hers, she flinched, pulling the phone back quickly, covering the screen as if I had tried to snatch it. It was a tiny movement, over in an instant, but it lodged itself in my memory. It was out of character, jarring. Then came the password. A few days after the flinch incident, I noticed she was suddenly entering a code to unlock her phone. She had never used one before. When I asked about it, trying to sound casual like I was just curious, she mumbled something vague about security updates, new privacy settings, and hackers. Her eyes avoided mine, and she quickly changed the subject. It felt incredibly off. Why the sudden need for secrecy? This was followed by the hushed phone calls. Her phone would ring, and she would quickly get up, sometimes mid-sentence, muttering, "Let me just get this," before disappearing into the bedroom or out onto the back porch. Her voice would drop to a near whisper, and if I happened to walk past, the conversation would abruptly stop or switch to trivialities. If I asked who it was when she came back, it was always a variation of just a work friend, just checking in with my mom, or nobody important. The frequency and the secrecy were unnerving. Beyond the phone, a palpable distance grew between us. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly, where we would finish each other's sentences or excitedly discuss plans, became stilted, like pulling teeth. If I brought up our future, saving for that renovation we dreamed of, the timeline for starting a family, planning our anniversary trip for the following year, she would give vague, non-committal answers. "Yeah, we will see," or "We can talk about that later, I am tired," before quickly changing the subject to something trivial about her day. It felt like I was still standing on the solid ground we had built together, planning our journey forward, while she was already mentally charting a course for a completely different destination, a destination that did not include me. The unease built, slowly, relentlessly. My friend Mike, who we often socialized with, noticed it too. He did not pry, not wanting to cause trouble, but he made comments that showed he saw the shift. "Is Sophia all right, Daniel? She seemed a little distracted the other night, not her usual self. Or has Sophia mentioned who she is hanging out with so much lately? I feel like I hardly see her anymore." Mike is a good guy, grounded and practical, not prone to gossip. So his casual observations, however mild, added significant weight to my own swirling, terrifying fears. I try to brush it off, to convince myself I was imagining things, that this was just a rough patch, stress from her work or something I did not understand. But the cold, tight feeling in my gut twisted tighter with each passing day, a constant physical manifestation of my growing anxiety. Something was fundamentally wrong. The real alarm bells began clanging, loud and insistent, about 6 months after these subtle changes started. One evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, Sophia brought up our finances. But it was not a collaborative discussion about budgeting or saving. Her tone was different, sharp, intense, urgent. She insisted, almost demanded, that we needed to get organized immediately. She said we should consolidate all our accounts, create detailed spreadsheets listing all our assets, savings, checking, investments, retirement funds, even list potential inheritances or bonuses for my job. She used phrases like, "It is just good financial hygiene," or "necessary for emergencies." But her eyes seemed distant, scanning the room rather than meeting mine, her body language stiff. It was not a suggestion. It felt like an interrogation, a checklist she needed to complete. Her questions were probing and specific, too specific for a casual chat about getting organized. "Daniel, where exactly are the account numbers and passwords for your investment account? The one you started years ago? And what about that stock portfolio from your grandfather? Is that all in one place? We need all that information together." Her sudden, laser focus on my finances, my individual assets she had previously shown little interest in, coupled with her increasing secrecy, felt like a slap in the face. Why now? We had always managed our money somewhat independently, contributing equitably to joint accounts for shared expenses, but largely managing our personal savings and investments separately, a system that worked for us and respected our individual efforts. This abrupt demand for total transparency and consolidation felt forced, unnatural, like she was working from a script given to her by someone else. Driven by a terrible premonition I could no longer ignore, and using the excuse of needing a document for our taxes as cover, I logged into our joint online savings account a few days later. My heart hammered against my ribs. Well, I found there was not just a few small withdrawals for groceries or bills. Over the past 2 months, there had been a series of substantial transfers out of the account, moved electronically to an external account with a name I did not recognize. It looked like a holding account or a different bank name entirely. These were not legitimate expenses. These were chunks of money disappearing, significant sums that added up quickly. This was the first cold, undeniable shock. It was proof. She was not just distant or stressed. She was actively doing something with our shared money, hiding it, siphoning it away without my knowledge or consent. Along with the transfers, I also noticed unusual, large credit card purchases made solely by Sophia that did not align with our usual lifestyle or any expenses she had explained. My hands trembled as I closed the laptop. I felt physically sick, a wave of nausea washing over me. Betrayal ripped through me, sharp and agonizing. It was not just about the money, although that was terrifying enough. It was the chilling realization that the woman I shared my life with, the woman I loved and trusted implicitly, was operating in secret, taking calculated actions against our shared financial security, against me. I knew instinctively I could not confront her yet. Everything Uncle James had told me rushed back. If she was planning something of this magnitude, confronting her prematurely might scare her off, make her double down on her secrecy, or accelerate her plan before I had a chance to protect myself. I needed advice, from someone who understood the legal and financial implications of what I was seeing and experiencing. My mind immediately went back to my Uncle James. He is not a divorce lawyer, specifically, but he is sharp as a tack, retired from a long, successful career in corporate finance and business law. He has seen a lot of human nature at its worst and is calmly pragmatic, but fiercely loyal to family. I called him that night, after Sophia had gone to bed, feigning sleep. My voice shook slightly as I explained the entire situation. The strange behavior, the sudden intense interest in my finances, the alarming transfers from the joint account, the weird credit card charges. I tried to keep my tone even, presenting the facts as objectively as possible, like I was giving a report, but the underlying fear, hurt, and confusion must have been obvious. Uncle James listened patiently, quietly, interrupting only with a few clarifying questions. When I finished laying out the disturbing pattern, there was a significant pause on the line. "Daniel," he said finally, his voice low and incredibly serious, "what you are describing is a classic pattern. Textbook. It smells strongly of someone preparing for divorce, and not just any divorce, but one where they intend to maximize their financial gain by minimizing yours. And those transfers? Those large, unexplained credit card charges? That is asset dissipation, plain and simple. Potentially fraud, depending on the details." His words were a second, more clinical shock, validating my worst fears and simultaneously terrifying me with the cold reality. "She is absolutely being advised by someone, Daniel. Someone who is telling her what information to get from you and what steps to take. She is gathering information, moving funds, making her move." He explained, in clear, stark terms, the legal vulnerability I was suddenly in if she filed now, before I took steps to protect my separate assets and ensure a fair accounting of marital property. He laid out exactly what I needed to do, immediately and discreetly. Secure my separate assets, document everything, gather any evidence I could of her behavior, and prepare for a potential legal battle. "You have to protect yourself, Daniel," he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for debate. "This isn't about trust anymore. It is about survival. Your financial survival." Taking such drastic, preemptive action felt surreal, like I was voluntarily stepping into a nightmare, preparing for a war I never signed up for against the person I should have been fighting alongside on the battlefield of life. Every fiber of my being screamed against it. This was Sophia, my wife, the woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with. How could I possibly move my assets, essentially hiding them from her? It felt like a profound act of distrust, a self-fulfilling prophecy of the end of our marriage. But the evidence was undeniable. The transfers, the secrecy, the sudden, aggressive financial pressure, the coldness in her eyes. It all pointed to one terrifying, unavoidable conclusion. She was planning to leave, and she was planning to take as much as she could. Over the next few days, operating on minimal sleep and high anxiety, guided meticulously by Uncle James, I began the painful cloak and dagger process of protecting my assets. This was not a simple online transfer. It involved detailed paperwork I had to sign and submit physically or digitally with secure logins, urgent phone calls to financial institutions under the guise of restructuring my portfolio or investment changes, and setting up new accounts or legal trusts with Uncle James's oversight that made my personal assets legally distinct and significantly harder for her to access or claim in a sudden divorce filing. Uncle James helped me navigate the legal intricacies, stressing the absolute necessity of doing everything by the book, legally and ethically, but with absolute discretion. I shielded my significant stock portfolio, which I had started years before meeting Sophia and had grown through careful investment. I secured my personal savings I had built over a decade of hard work. I also worked with Uncle James to legally document and protect a substantial portion of the equity in our home, clearly demonstrating the source of my much larger contribution to the down payment and the fact that most of the mortgage payments had come from my separate income, not joint funds. It felt like I was dismantling a part of my life, piece by piece, strategically placing obstacles in the path of an unseen attacker. as I signed documents, confirmed transfers, and updated beneficiaries, making Uncle James executor and beneficiary temporarily just in case. A heavy, cold weight settled on my chest. I had trusted her implicitly, completely, for years, sharing everything, and now I was forced into this defensive posture, playing a tactical game against the person I thought would always have my back. Yet a cold, hard resolve had also formed alongside the pain. I had worked incredibly, relentlessly hard for what I had built. My financial security was a result of years of discipline and sacrifice. I was not about to let someone attempt to steal it all through manipulation and deceit. While I was doing all this, living a double life, I had to maintain a facade of normalcy. Sophia was still probing about finances, sometimes subtly trying to trick me, sometimes with thinly veiled frustration that I had not provided the detailed lists and access she wanted. She would casually leave financial statement from our joint accounts out, ask where specific legal documents related to my property were filed, or try to get me to co-sign on new accounts, or even a small business loan for vague, undefined opportunities. I gave non-committal answers, always delaying or deferring, saying I would get to it later, or could not find it right now, or let us discuss that later when I am not so busy. It was exhausting, living a lie in my own home, constantly vigilant, watching her, wondering what her next move would be when she would spring her trap. Her behavior also fluctuated wildly, adding to the mental strain. Some days she was distant, cold, buried in her phone. Others, she would be overly affectionate, almost trying too hard, planning spontaneous date nights, or being unusually complimentary. It felt entirely inauthentic, like she was trying to gauge if I suspected anything or if I had complied with her demands for information and access. This oscillation, this emotional whiplash, made my suspicions even stronger. During this incredibly tense period, old memories kept surfacing, unbidden and painful, stark reminders of sacrifices I had made for her. For us, believing implicitly we were building a life together on a foundation of mutual trust and shared goals. I remembered the sleepless nights working extra jobs to help pay off the significant credit card debt she had when we got married, debt she had downplayed, but which took us nearly 2 years to clear completely, delaying our own savings goals. I thought about the 6 months I entirely supported her financially, without complaint, while she pursued an expensive passion project business that ultimately failed, draining a chunk of our joint savings we had earmarked for a down payment on a home. I recalled turning down a major promotion at work that would have required relocating to another state, a move I was excited about professionally, because she did not want to be far from her family and friends. I thought of countless expensive gifts I had bought for her, or times I had covered costs for her family members when she felt obligated but could not afford it herself. Each memory, each instance of my own generosity and selflessness twisted the knife of her current, calculated betrayal, solidifying my grim resolve that my decision to protect myself, however painful and unnatural it felt, was not just necessary, but morally justified. I had given freely, and she was planning to take everything. About 3 weeks after I finished securing the bulk of my assets, Mike mentioned seeing Sophia again around town, not just with friends, but with a specific man. This time he described him more clearly, sharp-dressed, maybe a bit older than us, had a slick, overly confident way about him, like he was always selling something. Mike did not know his name, but the description clicked uncomfortably with that vague individual I had seen interacting with Sophia at a social event a few months prior, the one I got a bad feeling from even then. It was another small piece falling into place, hinting at an external influence. The waiting was the hardest part. Weeks bled into a month. The tension in the house was a thick, suffocating blanket. Sophia was still guarded, but her aggressive probing about finances had stopped, replaced by a brittle cheerfulness or sulking distance. It felt like she was waiting, biding her time, perhaps believing I had either complied with her initial requests or was too oblivious to do anything. I knew it was coming. I just did not know when or exactly how. Then, finally, one Tuesday afternoon, about a month after I had secured my assets, it happened. There was a crisp, official knock on the door. A process server stood on the porch, holding a thick envelope. The formal, heavy packet containing the divorce papers. My heart sank, a cold dread washing over me, but the shock was dulled by the months of agonizing anticipation. I took the papers, a polite stranger handing me the formal end of my marriage, thanked the server mechanically, and closed the door. I stood there in the entryway for a long moment, the envelope heavy in my hand, the silence of the house deafening, a silence that felt like a final, echoing confirmation. It was real. It was happening. The war I had been bracing for had officially begun. I walked to the kitchen table. The envelope felt like a lead weight. I sat down and carefully opened the documents. The initial shock of receiving them was quickly replaced by a cold, burning rage, a righteous fury that consumed me as I began to read the details of her petition. They were beyond outrageous. This was not a standard divorce filing seeking an equitable distribution of marital assets. She was attempting a full-scale financial annihilation. She was asking for nearly everything, far more than half of the equity in the house, making claims about my lack of contribution despite my financial records, demanding access to my personal investments and retirement funds, the ones I had shielded, claiming they were somehow marital property despite their premarital origin or my sole contribution, demanding a significant chunk of my personal savings, and requesting exorbitant monthly spousal support payments that were completely out of line with her own substantial income and ability to work. The legal filing was filled with vague, yet damaging accusations against me, attempting to paint me as emotionally distant, controlling with finances, and solely responsible for the marriage breakdown, all to justify her greedy, predatory claims. This was the culmination of the attack, more brutal, aggressive, and filled with outright lies than I had ever anticipated. It was sickeningly clear she was not just seeking to end the marriage. She was attempting a hostile financial takeover of my life, using the legal system as her weapon. Uncle James had warned me it would likely be bad, that people could be cruel and greedy in divorce, but the sheer audacity, the blatant lies, the attempt to steal what I had worked my entire adult life for was breathtaking. It solidified every suspicion I had. This was not a heartbroken wife seeking separation and a fair split. This was a calculated, vicious attack, clearly orchestrated by someone who knew how to manipulate the legal system and exploit vulnerability. This is where Daniel stopped just reacting and started fighting back strategically, with the full force of the truth and Uncle James's legal expertise. Responding to the divorce filing was just the first step. The real battle began in the discovery phase. We needed more than just suspicion and alarm bells. We needed undeniable proof of her malicious intent and the conspiracy behind it. With Uncle James's guidance, we launched a full-scale investigation into Sophia's recent activities and communications, leveraging the legal process, like subpoenas for records, and any digital footprint she might have left. I became a detective in my own life, meticulously going through shared electronics, external hard drives she might have used, cloud storage accounts she linked to our shared devices, searching for anything that could provide a digital trail. First, we found email chains and message logs between Sophia and Marcus. The name Mike had mentioned, the man I had seen her with, finally had a face and a clearly defined, sickening role. He was not just a friend. The content of the messages detailed their entire plan, laid out in cold, clinical language. They talked about the timing of the divorce filing, the specific assets they were targeting. His investment account is the big one. Make sure you claim the down payment was joint money. How to minimize my potential legal defenses, and how to present Sophia as a victim. Their conversations were devoid of any real emotion, focused purely on the financial outcome. Marcus was clearly coaching her, giving her instructions, celebrating their perceived cleverness, and openly discussing the percentage of the settlement he expected for his consulting services. Further digging, assisted by some discreet inquiries Uncle James made through his network, revealed Marcus was known in certain unsavory circles. Not a legitimate financial or legal advisor, but someone with a history of preying on people and relationships, inserting himself to help one party extract maximum financial gain from the other during a split, often leaving a trail of ruined lives and questionable legal maneuvers. Marcus was a predatory opportunist, a parasite who had targeted my wife and, through her, my life. Second, mixed in with the planning messages were emails and texts involving Sophia's mother. This was another deep, unexpected gut punch. She was not just passively supporting Sophia's decision to leave. She was actively, gleefully participating in the conspiracy. She advised Sophia on legal tactics. Demand this. The court might grant it just to make him settle. How to present false narratives, say he was controlling with money, and even suggested ways to potentially hide smaller assets or expensive purchases made just before the filing. Her motive became sickeningly clear. She had always harbored resentment and disdain for Daniel's background, believing I was not good enough or rich enough for her daughter, despite my hard work. She saw this divorce as Sophia's chance, her entitlement, to secure a more appropriate, wealthy financial future, actively enabling and encouraging her daughter's greed and deceit. It was a level of familial betrayal I had never imagined. Third, and perhaps on a personal level, the most painful betrayal. Amidst the planning messages and the mother's enabling texts, there were explicit confirmations of a physical affair. Sophia had been having a sexual relationship with Marcus, not just a platonic friendship. This affair had been ongoing for a significant period, starting well before the intensification of her secretive behavior and the financial pressure. The betrayal was not just financial, not just emotional. It was complete, a total violation of our vows and the trust one had placed in her. She was not just planning to leave. She had already left, physically and emotionally, and was now simply executing a calculated plan with her lover and her mother to strip me bare financially. Armed with this undeniable mountain of evidence, the explicit planning messages with Marcus detailing the scheme, proof of Marcus's predatory background and financial motive, her mother's active participation and ugly motive, and the undeniable proof of the affair directly linked to Marcus. Uncle James felt supremely confident. "Daniel," he said calmly, "we do not just have suspicion anymore. We have motive, opportunity, and method laid out in their own words. This is not just a divorce case based on irreconcilable differences anymore. This is evidence of a coordinated attempt at financial manipulation, conspiracy, and potentially fraud. This changes everything." The confrontation did not happen in our home, with shouting and slammed doors. It happened in a sterile, neutral environment, a mediator's office. Uncle James and I sat calmly on one side, prepared and resolute. Sophia and her lawyer sat on the other, looking confident, almost smug. Marcus was not present. Her lawyer began presenting their demands, repeating the outrageous claims from the filing, painting a picture of Sophia as a wronged wife entitled to a massive settlement. Uncle James waited patiently, his expression unreadable. When it was our turn, he did not need to raise his voice or resort to theatrics. He simply, methodically, presented the evidence. He started with the documented financial transfers, linked them to Marcus through account details found in the messages, then presented carefully selected printouts of the most damning email and message exchanges between Sophia, Marcus, and her mother. He showed the step-by-step planning, the cruel comments about Daniel, the clear focus on seizing assets. He presented the evidence of Marcus's background and motive. And finally, the proof of the affair, undeniable and directly tied to her co-conspirator. The air in the room changed instantly, becoming thick with shock and disbelief. Sophia's face went from smug confidence to a sickening pale white, then blotchy red with a mixture of panic, disbelief, and raw fury. Her lawyer, clearly blindsided by the explicit nature and sheer volume of the evidence, visibly recoiled, shuffling through the documents frantically, whispering urgently and angrily to Sophia. He had likely based his strategy on Sophia's fabricated story and perhaps her mother's confident advice, unaware of the depth of the documented conspiracy and fraud. Sophia tried to deny things, to scream that the messages were fake, that I had somehow planted them, that Marcus was just a friend, that her mother was just being supportive. But the sheer volume, the detail, the dates, the context, it was undeniable. It was her own words their own words trapping them. The effect was devastating to her plan. Her lawyer, realizing the case he thought he had was based on lies and that presenting this in court would destroy his client's credibility and potentially lead to accusations of fraud, immediately asked for a recess. It was not a negotiation tactic, it was damage control. When they returned after a tense hour, their tone had changed entirely. The aggressive demands were withdrawn. The inflated claims were abandoned. Faced with the prospect of potentially facing serious legal consequences for attempting to defraud me, for conspiring to hide assets, and with her primary leverage, my assets, gone, and her credibility destroyed by the irrefutable evidence of the affair, the plot, and her mother's involvement, her plan collapsed entirely. She had been outmaneuvered, exposed, and defeated. The divorce was finalized relatively quickly after that. With her scheme exposed and her exorbitant demands off the table, Sophia had no leverage. The settlement was based purely on the actual marital assets that remained, which were significantly reduced thanks to my actions in protecting myself, and did not include any of my premarital wealth or investments. The spousal support she received was minimal, a fraction of what she demanded, reflecting her own ability to work and the circumstances of the divorce. Her infidelity and fraudulent intent significantly weakened her position. She did not get the life-changing sum she and Marcus had planned for. They got almost nothing from me. Her reaction, when she fully grasped the scale of her failure, the sheer emptiness of the financial victory she thought she had secured, was exactly what Uncle James had anticipated. During a final legal discussion about asset division, looking at the statements from the account she had targeted, seeing the zero balances where she expected millions, she had a complete meltdown. Frustrated, exposed, defeated, and realizing her cruel, greedy plan had netted her almost nothing compared to what she wanted, compared to the life she had so confidently planned with Marcus, she erupted. She screamed across the table, her voice raw with fury and disbelief, the mask completely off. But the accounts are empty. Where is it all? It was the perfect, pathetic, and chillingly revealing end to her cruel scheme. She was not upset about the end of the marriage, about the years we had shared, about the betrayal of vows. She was furious, purely and simply, because she had been outmaneuvered and the money was gone. The fallout did not end in the courtroom, although thankfully, Sophia and Marcus faced social and professional consequences in our community as the truth, or parts of it, became known among mutual friends and acquaintances. Their reputation was severely damaged. Marcus, in particular, seemed to disappear from the scene quickly after the divorce was finalized, perhaps seeking his next target elsewhere, or perhaps facing his own issues. While they might have avoided significant criminal charges, planning a divorce and demanding money are not crimes in themselves. Although fraudulent transfers and perjury in legal filings could be, depending on how aggressively it is pursued, they face the significant consequence of public humiliation and the utter failure of their cruel, greedy plan. Winning felt, and still feels, hollow, though. I protected my financial future, securing the assets I had worked so hard for, the foundation for my future. But the emotional cost was immense, a price I am still paying. The betrayal left a deep, jagged scar across my trust, making it incredibly difficult to open up or believe in others' intentions. It is a painful, life-altering lesson about how little you can sometimes truly know the person sleeping beside you, the depths of human greed, and the lengths some people will go to for money. I have had to rebuild my life, cautiously, slowly, piece by piece. The experience changed me fundamentally. I am more guarded, more pragmatic, less naive about relationships and human nature. The house feels too quiet sometimes, filled with ghosts of a past I thought was real. The dreams we shared, the future we planned, they feel like relics from a different lifetime, belonging to different people. I survived, I protected what I had worked for, I exposed their scheme, but the victory came at the cost of shattered heart and a cynicism about human nature that I might never fully shake. It makes you wonder, looking at the pieces of your old life, does some damage ever truly heal? Or do you just learn to live with the cracks?